This podcast may contain adult themes.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
The views and opinions in this podcast are expressly our own.
Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Is it okay if I kick your boss's ass? That won't affect your workplace chemistry, will it?
All right, who did this? I'm not mad. I just want to know who did it so I can punish them.
When I get to the workplace, I like to fuck shit up.
Welcome to Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories, hosted by me, Nicola.
And me, Gina, both with many years working in corporate roles. Come along as we interview some awesome guests from around the world about their experiences with toxic workplaces.
Sharing lessons learned and providing safe, supportive place to share their stories with those who might be experiencing similar situations.
Each week, we will provide tips and ways to identify some of the challenges associated with toxic workplaces.
In today's episode...
Hi, Nicola.
How
are you?
Fine. How's your week been?
It's only like midday Monday here. I know you're like already at Thursday or whatever, but
Tuesday in the future. It is
okay. Cool.
I don't know, like some ridiculous time in the morning. That's fine.
We do what we need to do, right? Well, it's only midday Monday here, and so far it's been a busy one. So lots of things, drama unfolding behind the scenes that I think we'll get into at some point. In a future episode. But I love how I wake up and like there's always like so many Nicola texts and you're like, oh my god, this happened, oh my god, that happened, I have a surprise for you. It's like, who doesn't want to wake up like that?
Well, I set up a web page and then sent her and I was like, I got a present.
No, it's so cute too.
How's your bikini drama going? Because that shit's like, I feel like
terrible.
Tayla and I are on the same page here. We're like, don't be doing that, bitch.
Yeah, my competition's not till September, so it's a long haul process.
She's only allowed like 2 calories a day and she has to do like all this weightlifting because she's doing a bikini competition. And I'm like, no, you're not seeing this body in a bikini.
Getting into a bikini is my competition.
Good one.
The fight of getting into the bikini.
That's
getting everything where it needs to be.
I just think like that I want to prove to myself that I can do it because I've always like worked out and been athletic. And now that I'm like old and have a child, I'm like, let's see what we can do here.
Why not? I think that's epic.
We'll see what happens. Okay, so I have absolutely, as usual, Nicola knows this about me. I have absolutely no idea what we're about to hear. I haven't looked at anything. You're lucky that I showed up on time. So yeah,
that's just fine. I was going to tell, I don't know if Nikki has told you, but I have a podcast with my husband. Yes. And I feel like every partnership is kind of this way. There's one of the partnership that kind of does everything, like does all the preparation, and the other one just shows up. And that's like, I am the Nikki and my husband is the Gina. So I can handle it. Good. It's all good. Like as long as it sounds like we're all,
organized.
We'll fake it till we make it. How about that?
I'm really excited because last time you got to introduce Smegan and now it's my turn.
I know. I'm really excited. Okay. You have someone special today.
I do have someone special. I get my niece, Tayla.
All right. So carry on. Who are we going to speak to today?
We're talking to my niece, Tayla, who is over in Utah, and I got to hang out with her in December, which was pretty cool. It was.
I remember that you were there.
So cute. And she has got her own podcast as well. So I'm going to hand over to Tayla, and you can give us a slurb on who you are and what you do.
Epic. So yeah, my name is Tayla. Ever since because I'm South African originally as well. When I moved to the States, I always had to like explain that my name is Taylor, like Kayla, but with a T, not Taylor, but with an accent. So that's just a weird name. I'm from South Africa originally, but I've lived in the States and in parts of Europe for a while now. Most of my background is in either international politics with human rights emphasis is kind of what I studied, but professionally, I've mostly worked in corporate training and in operations. And the toxic workplace we'll be talking about today is when I was the director of operations for you guys know this, like toxic workplaces are hugely very dramatic as it is. And so you're almost like, obviously it's important to talk about, and that's why we have podcasts like yours, but like how to do it in a way that avoids as much more drama as possible. Either way, so I'm trying to decide like how specific to be, but it was a small family business that I ran the operations for.
Can
but
you
right
tell
now,
us like what
go ahead.
industry it was in? Was it like
Yeah, so
beauty,
I would say
furniture?
alternative health.
Okay.
But a little more like high tech, so to speak. So it was like
That's not really like a run of the mill type item. It's very like unique and niche. And I can see why it would be like a family thing. And I think when nepotism and cronyism is involved, you're already kind of behind the eight ball. Yeah,
definitely. So and I will say like I definitely don't know as much about the health side, or I really just made the business run, and so that's the side that I focus the most on and that I know the most about. But certainly I think, and you'll probably empathize with this a little, is there is some complication because one of the owners, it's a mother and daughter ownership, and the daughter owner is a micro influencer or macro, I don't even know, but she's an influencer on Instagram as well, and that
has
some of like how complicated and frustrating. Yeah.
I feel like your head is like, your head would be like floating up with
it's just completely detached from reality.
So that's already a private, like my favorite word, problematic dynamic, I would say.
Certainly. There were a lot of things. I'll kind of let you guys guide me through how you want me to talk about it. But yeah, so I've worked mostly in operations. I pretty much ran that whole business for the year or so that I was there, but I'm back in corporate training now. And that's probably where most of my experience is in corporate training.
Sure. So when you first got into this role, like when you were you interviewed? Like what was the hiring process to get you to that point?
I was finishing my contract at my previous place of employment as a corporate trainer. I was kind of looking around. I'd had a couple of job offers, and I was fortunate enough to be kind of picky around this time. And I did know the owners personally, and so that's kind of how we got connected. And when I saw that they were posting for position, it sounded intriguing to me because one, I wanted to be helpful. They were going through like a difficult time personally, from what I knew. I wanted to be helpful, and I thought it might be kind of a good challenge, a way to push myself to kind of focus more on that operational managerial side of my experience. And so I reached out just out of interest. And then the interview really was just like and I will say, between the two owners, the influencer was the really the problematic one. And she's the one that most of my encounters were with. And so she just pretty much invited me to lunch. It seemed almost like she didn't know what to ask. I will say, actually, the position she was hiring for, the more questions I asked, the more I was like, hey, you actually don't need this position filled. You actually need this role. Like, you don't need an office manager. You need a director of operations. You need, because she was hiring a second office manager. And I was like, your office manager sounds like she's perfectly competent. You actually need this. And so I almost like told her what she needed. And she kind of asked me a lot of questions along the lines of, I knew that there might be a dynamic issue with like micromanaging. And I just kind of was very upfront that I like didn't want to be in a position like that. I wanted to be able to come in, see what the problems were, make the changes that were needed to make the company profitable. I was like, that's going to be my goal, is to make this company as profitable as possible, because that will help you, obviously the company, that's the point of the company, but that will help you personally the most. So will you give me the space and the trust to actually do that? And she was like, yes, 100%. I just want to be able to give it to you and like pretty much be hands off. And I was like, okay,
let me guess, that did not happen.
Oh,
spoiler alert.
I will say in waves, and that's very much how it felt, is that like depending on what was going on for her personally, or what kind of state of mind emotionally she was in, is how much space I did or didn't get to do my job.
So how long did you end up being there for? Like, what was the duration of time that you were there for in total?
A year and 2 months. 6 weeks of that, I had maternity leave. Was it actually maternity leave? No. So yeah, a year and 2 months.
Yeah. I get that. I did not. I was literally working from my hospital bed after I pushed out my daughter. I get it.
I was getting texts while I was in labor to do things. And
Yeah.
she knew I was in labor. In fact, the text started, hey, when you have a second from having a baby, can you? And it wasn't even.
Wait, what?
That's like, I was like,
do you have those saved?
and I just remember like looking at my phone.
I want to see a screenshot where it's like when you're done doing that little
When
thing,
you have a
pushing out a baby.
And I remember reading that text and being like, if you have to start a message that way, it's a message that should not be sent. And the craziest part was that it wasn't even a critical task. Even if it had been, it shouldn't have been sent, but it wasn't. It was, can you send me this person's number? Like, could you have asked any number of people for that? Should you have had it in the first place yourself? Yes. So I was just like, I didn't respond. I just ignored it. I was like, this is insane. It was kind of one of those moments where I was just like, you know what? This is, and I had this moments multiple times. This is right towards the end. I would say I took maternity leave 6 weeks,
Right,
where
quote, unquote.
I was on leave, but I was working. And then I stayed for 1 month after that. And then I quit. So this was right towards the end, but it was kind of one of those things where I was just like, truly, this person cares nothing for me. I am here to be blamed when things go wrong and to fix things when things go wrong, and to receive no gratitude or thanks or even just acknowledgement when things are going well. And I was just like, you know, I just had my second baby. Like, this really, I do not need this job. This is ridiculous. And so that kind of started it from there. But truly, like, that's just not even, if you can believe it, that's not even the worst interaction. So
I can. I certainly can believe it.
I feel like we're now down a pathway that we can't come back from. I feel like all of these stories are going to shock us, and then we're like, yeah, you know what? These aren't as shocking as I thought they were going to be anymore, because it's like
We're gonna get like desensitized.
We're going to be like, oh, a toxic workplace? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, sure.
Well, what
I mean,
happens
you've kind of put yourself in that role where you're gonna have to remind yourself what a workplace should look like pretty often.
We're gonna be like, yeah, the old hat. Well, you know, a toxic workplace. Excuse me. So my question is, so you had like a little bit of a red flag with the potential micromanaging, but of course she was like, no, you're going to be able to come and do your thing. Okay. So can you walk us through like your maybe first smallish red flags, just to hear what that was like? And then you can get into the meat and potatoes of it, because I'm interested.
It was
the whole
not
baby,
the
whole text with the, hey, when you're done pushing out a baby.
I feel like we need a screenshot of that.
It's not even. I'll send it.
Oh
You
my
can
God.
post it. So funny.
That will make my day.
But it wasn't a small red flag, unfortunately.
Okay.
And again, I'm trying not to be disrespectful and just like throw, whether this person deserves it or not, just throw them under the bus. I feel like what the tragedy the family was enduring was very real, and I think kind of recognizable. So I won't say specifically what, but they were going through something personally that was really intense. And the red flag that I experienced, which I'll tell you about in a second, was a huge red flag. But I think because of what they were going through, I chose to ignore it or to chalk it up to that, if that makes sense.
I get that, because you're like, well, I'm gonna give them a break because it's a tough time or whatever.
Perhaps exactly.
All right, so what was the red flag?
So the owner decided to, and again, she just had no business sense whatsoever. Obviously that's not something I knew quite how.
No, you can't know till you're in it, because then you see like the incompetence. Okay, go ahead.
She sets up a business meeting with like every single person that she could possibly involve, whether it was just like they contracted out their accounting work, so the contracted accountant comes, and then the owners and the owners' husbands, and obviously their family. So even though the owners' husbands, like, they aren't technically owners, or they just invite them, and the office manager, so I'm sitting at this big table with all these people that I'm just like saying like, hi, I'm the new operations director, her 50-50 owner, part owner as well. The mother, that's when she found out that I had been hired as the operations director. So she should have been informed. Actually, she should have been Like, I was like, you can't actually do that. You can't just hire someone without your owner,
like
like your partner
unilaterally
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she like found out at that table, and I was like, wow, this is so awkward. So we had negotiated, me and the influencer owner, at that
who's the daughter.
interview. Yeah. At that interview that we had negotiated a salary. It was the same salary that she had posted with the position. I said, that's fine with me. It was competitive enough that it was appealing to me. And so we had settled on that. At this big meeting, they start going through finances. They start going through the challenges that the company's going through, because this is like, I guess it became a meeting for her to like figure out what was going on in the company and how to fix it. And so we're going through that. You know, it's obviously struggling because no one with a business sense has their eyes on it and their hands on it. You know, credit cards are all over the place, and there isn't really a lot of reconciliation going on. It was a bit of a mess. And so she turns to me in this big meeting in front of everyone and says, hey, I know we said this number for your salary, but can we do this number instead? Like,
That's
just
a breach of privacy.
Wait a second. Did she say the actual number?
She did.
How can I have a little context? How old was the mom? How old was the daughter? Like, what was their experience, if
she's
any,
30.
in a corporate? Okay, so she's not super inexperienced, like 22 or something. Okay.
No, she's like 30, and the mother is a very experienced small business owner. The problem was when she invited her daughter to kind of inherit 50% of this company, they have a really toxic dynamic between the two of them. And so even though she technically had 50% ownership and say in everything, that didn't actually happen, because the daughter would frequently use their relationship to hold power, cause drama, threaten things with like the grandchildren, like you can or can't see them, or fortunately with this situation, as I said, like she said the number at this meeting, and like what can I say? Like I was
What did you say?
So what I did say was, you know what? I will take that lowered salary for 3 months, because by all means, if you want me to prove that I'm worth the money, because I know that I am, by all means, I'll take 3 months. Here, I'll send you a list of the parameters that I'll reach. And at 3 months, I want an evaluation based on all these things that I believe I can get done and I will get done. And I want to be pushed up to the original salary at that point. And they agreed. And I just like walked out of the meeting. I was just like, I was impressed with myself that I like didn't just be like, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was
had
disgusted at myself that I allowed that to happen as well, like a little bit. So it was just like, there wasn't really a way to recover from that very well. But at that evaluation as well, they were like, hey, I reached out. I was like, hey, it's been this time. Here's and it was this huge list of stuff I had accomplished and changed and improved about the company.
Love that.
And there was pushback by the younger owner, but the older owner said, if this is what was promised, because again, she wasn't involved, even though she should have been in any other decision. She's like, if you were promised that, we are going to do it. And so it did happen. But the wild thing is like they really opened themselves up to constantly be in a bad position, because I didn't have an employment contract with them, because the person in that role, which was me, didn't make one. And I very quickly, I was going to write one up for myself and like have them sign it. And very quickly I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Well, not only because of the conflict, but I was like, I don't want to be beholden to whatever they, would be in a normal contract. And so, but I made sure, and they didn't have like, where are the employment contracts for your employees? Like they just weren't anywhere. So I wrote them, I had them all signed. The damage I could have done to them personally and to the company was astronomical. The access to the banking, to everything. I could have been stealing money the whole time and no one would have even known. Fortunately, I did not. I would never, but I could have. I was like, you didn't. I don't even know how she knew I was qualified for the position. And again, it's fortunate that I was actually qualified to do what I was being paid to do. But I was just like, even if she went and hired my replacement, like, I just don't know how she's going to know if the person is qualified or not, or if the person would go ahead and steal this money. It was just a horrible situation. So the little red flags were huge, like pretty much immediately.
This influencer who's now kind of half running this business, is like, do you feel that there were some toxic personality traits with that, where they're not doing checks and balances, they're not, improving their skills in business, they're not taking the time to understand the concept of business?
Certainly, I think that this person was very good and is very good at being a victim, in that whatever narrative she needs to share or push to get sympathy and to get people to help for free or for a little bit of money or for to save her, essentially, like that was a constant cycle. And I got suckered into that that's the reason I went there. That's the reason I stayed as long as I did, was to help save her, to help her in a very difficult situation. And I just know that the only way she stayed afloat is because she was constantly surrounding herself with people who did know what they were doing, who were smart, that had the qualifications, that would constantly get suckered into this narrative that she's a victim and she's just hard done by, and she's had the wrong people around her and she's been taken advantage of, and she needs someone to come in and help her and save her. And, just the right person hasn't come along yet.
I would say that there's probably more of a high self-seeking and selfish behavior. So they're going to
I would
do
agree
what
with that.
benefits
Selfish.
them, and they're going to get upset or scared or have some kind of big reaction if it's going to take away something that they want or think that they can deserve, and they'll go to pretty much any length to get what it is that they want. I don't know if that makes them a narcissistic person, but I think that is a trait that we're seeing, like the self-seeking, selfish behavior to not always an extreme, but maybe more than average.
Yeah, I would agree. And there were so many evidences that that's what was going on, was that so there were personal loans taken out by this company to start it, and it was a very high upfront cost for the kind of equipment they were doing and the training and the legal legwork or whatever. And when I came in and was taking a look at the finances, trying to figure it out, I was like, they have not made a payment towards these loans in a couple of years. And there's no interest being accrued. And I spoke to the owner. I was like, hey, like you need to be budgeting and making payments towards these loans every single month. And she's like, it's really normal for companies to have debt. And I was like, I am fully aware that it's normal for companies to take out loans.
But that doesn't actually mean
it's not normal. Yeah, I was going to say, it's not normal for companies to not pay towards those loans and to not pay them off and to not accrue interest and to just be like, well, as long as I get my money.
What institution was she getting a loan from that didn't?
Personal loans from her parents and her parents-in-law.
Oh.
Oh.
I thought you meant like instead of doing like a business loan at a bank, like it would just be like me saying like I need like 50 grand for home improvements.
No, a personal loan, meaning like person to person. Yeah.
Okay. So that's why there was no interest, which I get.
Yeah, that's why. But they took advantage of it. And I was like, just because you can get away with not paying these people because they are being kind and trying to help you doesn't mean you should. It's not a good business practice. You're going to be on the hook for this at some point, or you're going to screw over these people that are in your life. And she just would kind of like almost gaslight me as if I was the one that I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, clearly you don't.
Yeah, certainly not.
Why repay a debt? I mean, isn't that how we all are? We just don't pay things.
And that's kind of, it goes back to that selfishness, right? Because very quickly I was like, hey, the amount of money that you are paying yourself every month is not sustainable with where the company is now and where it needs to be.
Can you need give us a range of how much they were paying themselves?
So it was in the 5 figures a month.
Okay. A month.
Per month. Yeah. And
high 5 figures or low 5 figures?
Low 5 figures, just into 5 figures. So it's like reasonable to an extent, but not at the costs that they were going through. Like they were just, there was like almost 100 grand in credit cards because no one was keeping their eyes on. I was like, who is responsible for checking this, paying statement balances? And it just wasn't happening. So I started to, I put parameters on like using the company card, what it could be used for, approval systems, paying it down. So that's just stupid debt to have as credit card debt because the interest rates. And I did so many things to just, I got that 100 grand debt down to like 10 grand within 3 months. And I just had that conversation where I was like, you just cannot be paying yourselves this amount right now. I think that I can get you back to that within this amount of months, but this is where the money is going to, that like I've cut costs as much as I can, but you can't, like, I can't find the money anywhere else. And so what ended up happening is the owners each halved what they were making at a huge fight. It was just like this whole thing of like, well, now we're making as much as you're making. And I was like, yeah, and I'm performing a service and getting compensated for that.
Yeah.
It was just like weird, where I'm like, it's not my responsibility to be able to afford me. It's your responsibility to afford me.
I like
you
that.
know?
I mean, I own a small business, and the first thing that I did when we were having issues during COVID was I took myself off payroll. All of my contractors, all of my employees, they all get paid before me. I haven't had a salaried payment in over a year.
And that's what I try to explain, is like,
that's what
you
a
are
healthy
the business owner.
does.
Yeah.
Yes.
You are not just a regular employee. And they weren't really working either. Like, they weren't actually bringing money into the company to justify that either. And again, when you're the business owner, like, that's the best part, is that like when the company wins, you win. But the problem is when the company doesn't, you are the one,
and you're still wanting
on
to
the hook
win
for that.
Yeah.
And so I like had that whole huge fight. It took like such convincing, like it's almost like she just wouldn't believe me. I'd show her the numbers. She didn't really understand them. I would try and break it down as much as I could to explain, like, this is what will happen if you stay on this trajectory. Eventually the fight happened, and she's like, well, this is what we're doing. We'll do it for this many months. And then within 2 months, she came back and she's like, put me back. I don't care what you do. Put whatever you need to on credit cards, whatever, you're putting me back. The problem is she didn't also do that for her business partner. And so the business partner was still making half, and they knew that. And
that was probably the mom who was making
her
half.
mom. Yeah. And that obviously it's not even legal. Like you, if you are 50-50 owners, you have to have the same payout, because it wasn't technically a salary. It's like owner's draws. Right.
It's like profit,
but the problem is,
right, the profit share should be equal. Yes.
But the problem is the mother is a business owner. She knows this is only going to hurt me in the long run. Like, if the company cannot survive, like, I need to cut down now until there's no money. And so she was unselfish enough to like know that, and to continue taking half of what she was supposed to be taking, or what the other partner was taking,
right.
And it's just, again, further evidence of like that selfishness, because I was like, you're literally telling me, like, tank the company, whatever you need to do, just get me my money, essentially. And I was just like, that is just not the way you run a business. And that's the problem, is she constantly expected me and the office manager and other management to act as if it was our company. If there's like a thing that goes wrong in the middle of the night, it was us that had to solve it. We are the ones that had to like show up at 6 o'clock in the morning for whatever thing. I mean, I'm like, but this is your business. When something needs to happen, like, it is on you to make it happen, because if your company wins, like, you win.
That just is like, it sounds not normal to me, what you're describing. Like,
certainly not.
Like,
can we just pause here for a second and remind people that if this podcast is something you enjoy, we would love to hear from you.
You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Let's Break Up Toxic Workplace Stories.
Sharing and subscribing really helps us feel validated. Well, we come back to that accountability thing, right? And we're starting to see quite a lot in these toxic workplace stories, is that accountability where it should be held, in our case, the CEO and the COO, they didn't have accountability, or the same level of accountability that we had. And, then you look at Meg's story, and it's like, again, there wasn't any accountability in the senior leadership, and they lack experience. And, I'm just starting to see a couple of through lines that are maybe, trends, or something for us to deep dive into later, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's because we were the only ones who knew what the hell was going on or what to do. But we just would constantly, like, me and the office manager went through so much because we cared about the business. Like, we really thought the business like had so much potential and could help so many people. But yeah, we should have said no more times than we did. I'm someone, I would say, I feel like I'm pretty good at setting and maintaining boundaries. And even so, like, they were just constantly pushed, that I even got broken down that I wasn't as consistent at maintaining my boundaries. And if
I
that can
think-
happen to me, I was just like, no wonder this poor office manager, because she's the best person maybe that I know. And she just constantly would get her boundaries pushed and take blame for things that were not her responsibility. And I was just like, I can't even describe to you, like, it was such a toxic, you just don't realize how bad it is until you leave. You guys have spoken about that. And even for me, as someone who I was recognizing it in the moment, like truly didn't realize just how bad it was until looking back and in hindsight.
I mean, I think Nicola and I talked about that like at length. It's like, because I think we give excuses to people, especially in a smaller company. We're like in your case, there was a very real tragedy that happened. In my case, I just kept thinking like, well, of course I can fix this. But, you know, there was like, and like whatever roadblocks that were being thrown at me, I was like, it's just because they don't have experience. Like we always find an excuse to, but I think, and I know you listened to most of, I think the first 2 episodes, like part of it for me was ego. Cause I was like, they're not going to tell me, like, I know better. And I don't always know better, but most of the time in this particular situation I did. Was there any element of like that for you?
Well, I would say that I'm like very much I'm pretty aware of what I'm not as good at, what I don't thrive as well in, and I'm aware of what I do. I am good at getting things done. I'm good at almost editing and fixing what needs to happen, putting the puzzles together to make sure that it runs smoothly, it runs efficiently, and that people generally are happy and whatever should be taken care of is, so that they can thrive in their role and do their job. And that's that corporate training side that like I am also aware of, like what needs to happen for the boots on the ground in order for them to actually thrive and do the best that they can. And I think there was an element of like, I know what needs to be done. I'm being paid to do it. I'm just going to do it. And this is going to be like, this roadblock by this person is going to make it so that I cannot do my job. So I'd rather fix the roadblock and just do it so I can get my job done, rather than sit with the consequences of someone else not getting what they need to get done. That was a failure on my part, because it's, again, taking on responsibility that isn't sustainable and isn't right, but it's so easy to get sucked into that. And I think a lot of people, even in non-toxic workplaces, I think people struggle with that. If there's something that will affect like your work.
Yeah. And also like you take pride in, like I take immense pride in my ability and what I can do. Cause like you, I know what I'm good at. I know how to get things done. I know how to, you know, do product development like in my sleep. So I take pride in what I do, but there's a hard line between like thinking like your job is the most important or your role is the most important because that's what you know, and understanding that you're working for people. Like it's a very hard line that I think gets muddled often. And for me, that's something I need to work on, you know. That's my part is, you know, I can sometimes take on too much pride in my work and then it becomes like tunnel vision almost.
Yeah,
so I don't know if you experienced that either, but
totally. And it's actually something like in my husband and our podcast is called Babe, What Do You Know About? Because we just pick a topic and we delve into it. But we've recently done a few episodes on like mental health or, you know, on kind of interpersonal relationships. And we talk about this a lot, is like just being a little more connected to reality and being honest with yourself. Like, even if it's not attractive or you don't like what you have to face in yourself, like it is so much more worth it than disconnecting from that reality and getting yourself into a situational relationships that ultimately like aren't serving or aren't healthy. It is better to be like, you know what, like this is my role and my part in what happened. It's just, you know what I mean?
It's hard to get, because like, especially in a toxic workplace, like it's very easy to point the finger. Right?
Easy.
So it's harder to say, okay, yes, this is a toxic workplace, but also I have a part to play. Why
Yeah,
did I
I
stay
actually-
so long?
I
Like,
actually
why didn't I
recognize
listen
that.
to the red flags, you know?
In your,
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was episode 1 or 2, you spoke about kind of your role in like the gossip culture. And I thought that was really cool that you recognize that in yourself and you're like, that's just not me, but I allowed it to be. And I will say that I kind of played into the same thing where I just was like so frustrated. Everything just like boiled right to the top that I allowed it to get to
You
the point where it
engaged in
spilled
behavior.
over.
Yeah, that
That's
you
just
wouldn't
not
normally do.
me. It's not
know.
professional. And I talk about this with my husband. I think we maybe even did it in one of our episodes where I just like, have you ever played on like a sports team that's like, you're really like a basketball team or whatever, like you're a really good team. And then you play a really crappy team. And for some reason, like you are not playing well. And you're like, just like pulled right into their
Water
level. And you're like,
sinks
we
its
should
level,
be
right?
killing these people. But we are like, for whatever reason, we're playing like not our normal game. And that's kind of how it felt in this workplace. And I think a lot of people can feel that way. We're like, I should be like, this is my standard. This is my level. And for whatever reason, like I'm just getting sucked in and allowing myself to get sucked into this
but I
level.
think it's like, that's the whole corporate culture that each company creates, right? So if you're seeing the people that you're reporting to, playing the victim, gossiping, it subconsciously and subtly tells you that's okay. We're okay with that. So then you might start doing things that you wouldn't normally do. In my instance, like I was gossiping about my frustrations to people who should have been directly reporting to me, whereas you're probably gossiping with your coworkers, right? Which you wouldn't normally do. So, it reminds me of the phrase water seeks its own level. Right. So it's like,
yeah, it's a great phrase.
Like if you're surrounded by that, there's another good saying. It's like, if you sit in a barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
Yeah.
So it's like all of that. It's like, you're
Truly.
around it, it's going to happen. So, all right. So why don't we go into, so we have this big red flag with the whole salary thing, which I would not have, I would have just been like, what?
I was like actually shocked. I was
Is
like,
that serious? I was like, you're so funny. What a funny joke. Like, I don't know. Okay. So that happens. There's all this monetary stuff. Were they ever profitable, this company?
that's the crazy thing is they brought in so much money, but the spending was so high and the debt was so high
that they couldn't ever be profitable.
They should have been so profitable, but there was just such a deep hole to dig themselves out of that they wouldn't prioritize or do what they needed to do to dig themselves out of it.
So lack of understanding that
and that's
like a backseat or sacrifices to get you where you want to go. Yeah.
And that's why the office manager and I would talk about this all the time. We're like, this should be the best, most profitable, most interesting company out there with this demographic, and it's just subpar, like because you're just like on a boat, like filling the holes instead of actually like taking a second, like shutting down, fixing everything so that like, you know what I mean? It was just it should have made, and it made so much money, but it should have been profitable. It should have been able to keep up with whatever quality of life they'd had. The people they were paying should have been able to be compensated much more fairly, but because of terrible business decisions, it wasn't.
It sounds like they're hemorrhaging money. They're making poor business decisions. So what was one of the other, give us some more tea on the red flags, that maybe a couple highlighted stories that you think are interesting that we all want to hear about.
There's so many. That the company had just gone through this legal battle to be able to operate a specific kind of treatment, because it is kind of a new treatment to not do like in a doctor's office or in a hospital. And so they had just gone through, signed after 2 or 3 years. I like took over at the end and got the deal signed with the government. Again, I'm trying to be as vague as possible.
Like
the
government provider for
divisions that needed that agreement signed, and we had parameters to operate within. And I was like, great, this is perfect. The owner would constantly not abide by those guidelines to treat her friends or people that she knew not in the right way, for free, and not with the right paperwork signed, and not with the right supervision and the providers that were supposed to be there. And I would constantly say, like, this is actually literally not legal. Like, just have your friends like make an official appointment. You don't even have to charge them, but like go through this
Go through the right
procedure,
channels. Yeah.
because you've just got this sign. Like, you could lose everything because you're making this like dumb short-term decision. And she just would constantly either ignore my messages. She would start to have the office manager like keep the information from me. Like, she'd be like, don't tell Tayla, because she's not gonna let me like do this, or I'm just gonna have to hear about the drama that she does, like she wants it to be done in this procedure. She started having people like keep it from me just to do, and it was like such dumb things too, where I'm just like, you can literally still treat your friends for free, even though, again, dumb business decisions, but like by all means, but just do it this way, in this procedure, in this time of, and just, it was such a battle. And I just felt like, they're going to get in trouble eventually, because this is just these small, tiny things are so constant. And I am going to be blamed for it, even though like I am the one saying, don't do it. Here's the procedure. I totally disagree with this. And that's kind of what happened. And so before I quit, I got her on a Zoom call, and I was like, I'm going to record this, because I feel like if they get into legal trouble, she's going to say, oh, I wasn't running the business at the time. This person was. They're the one at fault for this. I like knew this would happen. So I was like, let me get this on record, get her to talk about it, get her to kind of admit that this, like, that I gave her the advice to, and I was like, I won't participate in it, and I this is illegal, and that she did it anyway. And I got it all. I didn't even tell her, because I was like, I'm just going to have it in case I need it. And that's the narrative. Like, when I left, that's what like current employees were saying, like, yeah, she's just, when unemployment was calling, and when these people are calling, she's blaming it on you and the office manager, that like, you are the ones who actually did these. You guys did the treatments though. Like, I didn't know anything. I just stepped into the company again after they left. Yeah. And I just knew it would happen, and stuff like that happened all the time. And then, when I put in my notice, I went on a Friday and I was like, hey, I am being headhunted by a couple of companies. And I mean, we're in Silicon Valley here in Utah. Like, there's just huge tech companies here. And there were a few that I had interviewed with, unfortunately turned down the positions for this one, that had kept my name in and started reaching out. I had just come back to work from my maternity leave that I constantly worked through.
When you're done having that baby.
Yeah. Well, look, once you're done,
with the phone,
squeeze it out.
When you have a sec from having, and I had come back to work, and I was just like, you know what? I just want to give you as much heads up as possible that like, I think I'm going to move on. Like, I think I've done as much as I can for your company, because you're not really allowing me to be able to do my job. Like, because you don't actually, let me put myself back in. Oh yeah. So I had this conversation with her on the Friday. I was like, I just want to give you as much notice. I really just don't think I can do anything more for you, because you keep demonstrating to me that you don't trust me. You don't want to listen to my advice. You're going to go around me to do whatever you want to do. Like, I think you're wasting your money on me, not because I'm a waste of money, but because like, you're like, I don't know why you have me in your company and why you're paying me when you don't listen to me ever anyway. And she was just like I terrified, right? Her response was terrified, because she knew like, I'm the reason this company has been able to do. And so she's like, well, I'm going to need you to give me at least a month's notice if you end up leaving. And I was just like, you know what? I don't have anything solid yet. I'm not going to commit to giving you a month's notice. I will give you as much notice as I can, which is why I'm even bringing it up now. But she was just like terrified. And she's like, you're going to have to teach me like everything. I need to know how to run my company. And I was like, I will, again, with whatever notice I give you, I will.
You've had a year, babes, to learn from me.
But also, like, how did the company even, I mean, this is a whole different conversation, but how did it even get that bad? Like, how did the co-owners not know what's going on generally? Maybe not specifically. Like, it seems like very strange to me.
I constantly would try and train them and walk them through meetings and explain how, like, why difference, because they'd complain, why is so much money going to this or that? And I'd be like, let me explain the procedure to you. But it would just go in and out.
But this would have been happening for like years before you came on and spotlighted this debacle.
Yeah, there was a former employee before I joined. There was like some months between him and me that he had kind of kept eyes on things, and then as he wasn't there anymore, it got bad. But yeah, like it just, they were just so disconnected from their own company and they didn't know how to do anything with it. The older owner was because she had been kind of like pushed out, essentially. She wanted to be involved in No, and the younger one because she was doing who knows what with her time. But so I had this discussion. I was like, I'm going to give you as much notice as possible. And she was like, okay, because the office manager had just quit 2 weeks before as well. And all the employees knew, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I want to stay. Exactly. And so she's like, I also don't want, she like came back to me an hour later. And she's like, I don't want you to tell any of the employees, like, I'll let them know like on your last day. And I was just like, let's talk about that. Because I like needed to process it. And then I went back to her and I was like, you know what? I'm actually not comfortable with that. These are every single employee they had, I had hired. Like no employees had, it was like a cycle. And you spoke about this in your toxic workplace, like signs, is like the turnover was so high, despite them all being very passionate about the industry, so excited to get the job. Like it just became so ridiculous that they would constantly quit. And I would try to be as upfront, I would try to work with them, but I had hired every single one of these people that I was leaving behind. And I was like, I'm actually not comfortable with just like making them feel like I've kept the secret from them and just leaving. So I was like, no, I actually would like to tell them that I've given my notice and I'm going to a different position. And she's like, well, I will tell them. And I was like, well, okay, but just so you know, if people ask me about it, like I'm just going to be transparent with them. By all means, if you want to announce that you can. So it's about 3 p.m. on the Monday, and she announces a work meeting very early in the morning the next day. And keep in mind, I have a 2-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old baby. And I was just like, this is like less than 12 hours notice almost. Like, well, it was like 12 hours. I was like, I am not going to figure out childcare early in the morning to show up to a last minute meeting that I will watch the recording of Zoom afterwards. So I let her know, like, I'm not going to be there, but by all means, like, you can announce it there. Later in the day, I'm listening to this recording and I was just like, my jaw dropped, because in that meeting, she goes through this whole, and she's like crying in the meeting, and this whole narrative about how she's needed this time to like deal with this tragedy, and that 2 weeks ago, which again, we had discussed things on Friday, 2 weeks ago, she pulled me into her office and told me that she wanted to take over my job and be connected to her company again. And she wanted to step back in, and she's pretty much asked me to leave. And this whole narrative that was just literally a blatant lie that she's telling these people. But the problem is like all of these people know that. So they're all just like listening to this crap.
So they know she's lying.
They're pretty sure, right? And a lot of them kind of reached out and they were like, hey, that kind of was weird. And I was just like, I am not going to lie to these people. I was just like, yeah, that's not what happened. And
but
I was just
also
like
an ultimate form of gaslighting.
Totally. And I was just
and it's like a last like fuck you at the end of the day kind of.
And I like in that same recorded like conversation, I just like had it out with the owner. I was just like, something that's really bothering me is the fact that like you lied to these people. And I just like knew that she would gaslight me and be like, oh, I just didn't tell, like that was my plan all along. I was going to ask you to leave. I was going to do all these things.
Oh, was it?
I just hadn't told you yet. You just didn't know that. So that was true. You just didn't know. And I was just
I have a boyfriend, but he goes to a different school.
Yeah.
So you probably won't ever really meet him.
Yeah. And I just like even said to her, I was like, you know what, dude, like I didn't even want to have this conversation with you because I knew you would say that. I knew you would figure out some way to say that, no, I didn't actually lie to my whole company. Like this was the reality anyway. I was going to ask you. And I was like, so you like begging me to give you this much notice and to stay and to train you on everything. That was like, what was the lie exactly? And so it was just like so funny. I sent the recording to my husband, Sam, and we were just both like, oh my gosh. And so I was just like, and she was like, I'm feeling some resentment from you. Like you keep like, whenever I'm asking for training, you keep like acting like annoyed. And I was like, dude, I am annoyed. Like, I was just like very open with her. I was like, I am annoyed because Like, I shouldn't have to teach you how to bookmark a tab. Like, you're telling me I have 2 weeks to train you how to do like a very intense job. Like, I was just like, of course I'm annoyed, because like, you should know how to do this, and you're going to be the one like this. I was just like,
You just
so
had
done
it.
by the end.
Yeah,
I like
you had
couldn't
it.
walk out of there for my last day like soon enough. And especially when the office manager left, I was like, oh, I have to be here for like this many more weeks without her, like dealing with this. And I just, you know, I just couldn't walk out there fast enough. And the person she got to replace the office manager was a former nanny of hers. What qualifications she had, I don't know. But I was just like,
Sounds
dude,
like none.
I think she was just so manic that like whoever put themselves in, and this former nanny totally had the exact same suckered into it. It was like, oh, I'm just, and I think she was a pretty capable person. And she had that mentality of like, she just hasn't had the right help. Like, I can come in and fix it. I'm the one who, and I tried to be as upfront with her as possible and be like, yeah, I felt the same way, you know, but good luck. And guess what? You know, 3 months, 4 months in, that person also left their dream job for a different position.
So where is this company now?
They are, again, it's so difficult to know, because the narrative and the messaging that they give out is always so positive, and like things are growing so much.
Positivity,
Who knows?
Toxic positivity.
So wait, but they're still in business.
They're still in business. I imagine that someone else has come in, that they have stopped repaying the loans that I set up the payments for. That's probably part of it. They're probably because I was the one who came up with the wage offers and all that. They're probably underpaying their employees again by a lot. And they probably suckered in some other friend that is a very successful business owner to like help them manage some things. So I knew that would happen. I was like, you know, the downfall of the company will be a bit out, because someone else will come in and try and fix it for her. And they will have the energy to kind of do that up front until they move on, and the next person will.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like, I just couldn't see a way of that being fixed without some really drastic changes. But even so, like, even if someone they would have to pay someone to take the company, if that makes sense.
So if you had to look back on your year and 2 months there, do you feel like there's, you know, any situations where you maybe perpetuated the toxic workplace culture, or do you feel like there's lessons you learned or things you could have changed to try and avoid that?
Totally. And Gina and I spoke about this a little bit a minute ago, but definitely like I did get suckered into some of the toxic behaviors by the people just like needing to kind of let off steam. And I shouldn't have done it in the ways that I did. But I will say that I did learn I knew this in theory, but through experience, I did learn that like the job is literally not worth my life outside of work. It's not worth my time and energy to save people who just don't care for the gratitude is just not going to be there. I just learned that like the boundaries need to be defended, and if they're constantly being kicked at, then that's going to be a huge sign that like I just need to remove myself, and as quickly as possible, because it doesn't improve with time. And that was always my constant hope, like after this tragedy is over, after this amount of time or this anniversary or whatever, like it will improve, and it just never does, I don't think. And so I think, you know, if someone kicks at your boundaries a little bit and they respond very respectfully when you pull that up, like your boundaries being pushed a little is not a bad thing, but how they react when you maintain that boundary is what makes the big difference. If someone was like calling me constantly at this amount of time, like at this time of night, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm actually going to spend this time with my kids, I'm not going to take these calls, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. And the older business owner, she would constantly be like, I know it's not your work hours, here's a text, please respond when it's time. That's not a big deal to me. But someone who will constantly push at them after that being maintained and just not respect them, it's just not worth it. And just move on as quickly as possible, because it is better. It does get better. There is a better situation out there for you.
Yeah.
That's a good one. There is, you know, it might not feel like it right now, but you know, there will be something better, and you will be equipped to better identify those toxic traits as well.
And you will love even if you love what you do, but the workplace is that like you will love what you do better and more if you're in a healthy situation. So just let yourself move on as quickly as you can, because you will love what you do even more, even if the role is not exactly what you love the most. Does that make sense?
Do you think you learned something like really positive from this experience?
Yeah, I increased my skills like tenfold, like working for a smaller business, because I'd worked for bigger corporations and I'm working for a bigger corporation now, just teaches you different things, like how to run a business, like from the ground up. I learned because I pretty much had to run the business. And so I'm actually really happy and grateful that I did learn those skills and increase my abilities and like get into the nitty gritty of like what goes into actually running a business. It's so much.
Yeah.
But and the biggest thing that I learned, like I said, is just it's not worth it. Like my family and my time is way more worth it than like the money or whatever like temporary like hooks of praise or kindness to keep me in that situation that I might get.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think that's something that we sometimes overlook, that out of every what we think is a terrible situation, there is something good that comes out of it. Sometimes it's harder to spot it, but eventually you do get to that point where you're like, okay, so, I'm glad that happened for X, Y, and Z reason.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm not going to let it be only a negative thing. You know what I mean? Like I have, and I will continue to have learned from that the hard way, but I have learned from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, thanks for sharing your story. It was
It's a bit of a roller coaster.
It was.
Anytime. I know. And again, like I didn't even get into like in any way, but I feel like me and my husband should have you guys on our podcast as well to kind of talk about workplaces. That's something we haven't discussed really yet, is just not only like how to build a positive workplace environment, but how to avoid or how to navigate within a toxic workplace. I feel like you guys would have some really good things to say. So I'm probably this is my putting you on the spot way to ask you guys to get on.
This is also a shameless self-plug, but you know what?
Yeah.
I love it.
literally get on there, because we just would have so much fun talking with you guys. I just love listening to the podcast. I love how transparent you guys are. Like I'm a fan already. Like I'm subscribed. Yay. I've left a rating. Like you guys are great. So I'm happy you have it.
And it was good having you. So thank you so much. And we really appreciate it. And
I'm sure it will too. I mean, you get someone into an environment where they're talking about this crazy stuff and like, it's like therapy. You just got to get it out.
Yeah, I know. We could probably talk for like hours.
See you later.
Like anytime anyone listens to the original like recording of when I had laryngitis, they're like, what? They're like, are you going to be doing a murder mystery or a romance novel? Are you going to be? I'm like, neither. I'm just dying.
The frog. It's like,
it's so bad. All right, so that was really good.
Geez, people have toxic workplaces fucking everywhere, right? Like this is so depressing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, we came a long way with that one, and we wouldn't be able to do this podcast without you. Like, even though yes, it was my idea. Like, I'm the visionary, you're the operations.
Oh my God, are you the charismatic leader in this situation?
No, I just had a good idea. That's it.
The charismatic leader of Toxic Workplace Podcasts,
which is actually secretly a cult. Yeah, no.
Well, a cult of two. I don't know.
I know.
A cult of two people. A cult of two people just, talking about cults.
Yeah. Well, you do love a good cult, Nicola. All right. So
thank you for joining us today. If you would like to share your story, we would love to hear from you.
Also, leaving a review helps us create more content because it shows us there's an interest in this topic.
For those of our listeners who do better with reading, we have closed caption available on YouTube.
See you next week, same time and same place.